Good evening, Eugene. How are you?
I'm great, Jana. Thanks. How are you tonight?
Excellent. Thanks very much. For anyone who hasn't tuned into our podcast before, I'm Jana London, founder of the Natural Women's Council, and Eugene Garvin does all of our research for our teams and gets the information out. And he's a retired director of engineering. So tonight we're going to be talking about something that hasn't really, for the significance and the magnitude of this, it hasn't really been all over the news in the way that we would expect because of the impact on our sovereignty and our democracy and our freedoms. And this is the United Nations Pact for the Future. So we're going to walk through that really quickly in the next 15 or 20 minutes. And how this affects really why we're getting involved in presenting it to everyone, and why we want to, express our concerns is it affects the women, the children, the families, but really every aspect of our life on planet Earth, from our sovereignty, our potentially our health freedoms, our food sovereignty and everything.
So we're looking at the United Nations Pact for the Future that has recently taken place. I think most people could be forgiven for not knowing that this occurred at all because it received very little attention in the mainstream media. Certainly wasn't in the headlines, and I think we've heard very little about it. So we're going to educate you a little bit about it tonight. We'll keep it pretty tight, but we'll hopefully give you some pointers. So here is some of the highlights. So if you do a search online, you'll find very few articles in the mainstream media covering this. You'll find the United Nations articles covering it. So they've really kept the messaging on this very tight. So you can see it here, Sustainable Development Goals. This is from that website. There's a specific website for the Sustainable Development Goals. You can see them all down there, the 17 goals on the right-hand side. You can see the Summit for the Future. That's the event that ratified this pact that took place recently. So we'll have links to all of these things in the description.
For anyone who
Yeah.
hasn't seen these bright, colorful goals, if anyone wants to look back at, really most of the politicians are wearing this little round lapel, and that round lapel is the Sustainable Development
Yeah.
Goal
Yeah.
lapel. This is driven by the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum is corporate driven. It's made up of 1,000 of the world's richest, biggest, most powerful companies. So it doesn't have the people's interest at heart. It has the corporate interest at heart. And that's what that means. Although, you could go to your local library, these are there. Your local park. This is in the near the pollination garden, because it's under the guise of being friendly to the birds and the bees and the flowers, when that's not what it is at all. So I would encourage anyone watching this to dig into the detail of these goals. And most of what we're seeing around us now that we are not satisfied with is being driven from the United Nations and the World Economic Forum under these Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah. So it's quite intrusive. These goals are very intrusive. And I think, Jana, we'll cover them in a separate session. I think it's worthwhile actually stepping through them for people. But this is the important thing. The pact has been signed. Ireland have willingly, with Micheál Martin representing Ireland at this event, we're all on board, fully on board with this. Remember, immigration is part of this. So the whole issues we're having right now with immigration, that's a subset of this, as well as things affecting our agriculture, for example, the national herd. You really do need to get awareness of this a little bit more. So let's move on. We'll move on here. So this is just one of the articles talking about it. A future to transform global governance. Think of what that means. Global governance. Like this headline, if somebody, a right-wing person had put out this headline a couple of years ago or a couple of months ago, it would have been called far right, propaganda, basically, if you actually even used that headline.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not hiding it anymore. They're actually being very open about it. So
And
here it
Eugene,
is.
we can share the tweet as well from Michal Martin. I have the tweet
Yes.
here. It went out on the 23rd of September, and in his tweet, he said he's pleased to speak at the UN Summit of the Future Interactive Dialogue. Yesterday, we adopted the Pact for the Future, the most wide-ranging international agreement in years. That's the truth. And he concludes his tweet by saying, and this is really chilling, now, our task as world leaders is to implement it as we build a more sustainable and peaceful global order.
Yep. So did you vote for this? Did the Irish people actually vote for this? Do we have a referendum for this? I don't think so. Okay, so let's move on. Here it is, so at least you can learn about it. Michael D. Higgins. Michael D. Higgins, here he is, our President of Ireland, who attended and addressed the conference. And he, you can see what he's talking about here. No, actually, some of the points he makes I wouldn't necessarily disagree with. But this just shows you, I mean, this man is a socialist, we know that. So it's not surprising he's probably very supportive of what's going on here. So this is it. You can have a read. So Michael D did talk at this event, and I think his speech is online. I think you'll probably find it. I think actually RTE have it. Actually, I think it's on the RTE player. The General Assembly. So here is the Pact of the Future. We'll have a link in the description so you can have a read. And there's a few other supporting documents, Jana, I think that you dug out as well, and we'll include links to all of those in the description. So you can get up to speed on the new one world order, so to speak. So it's you notice it's the United Nations that are doing this, not the WEF.
They have a
It's not,
strategic partnership. So the United
yeah,
Nations and the WEF are really, they're just different
one
wheels
and the
on the
same.
same car, and the
Yeah,
same with the
yeah,
WHO. They're all really one and the same,
yeah,
working towards this same New World Order, Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2030, all of the things that everyone
yeah,
listening can do your own research on.
yeah. So that's it, and we're going to we've got two YouTube videos actually that we want to play for you. And the first one, which is probably going to be the most interesting one from the actual event itself, it's the Argentinian president, and this is from Forbes now, but you'll probably get this video actually from the United Nations links as well. He gives his address. It's about 15 minutes. We'll play a little snippet of it now, Jana, so just so people can get a flavor for it. So take a listen and hear what he has to say for just a few minutes of his 15-minute address.
Going further down this path, which in the very words of the Secretary General, calls on us to define a new social contract, redoubling our commitments in the 2030 Agenda. On this, I'd like to be clear about Argentina's position. The 2030 Agenda, although it's well-intentioned in its goals, is nothing but a supranational government program that is socialist in shape. It purports to resolve the problems of modernity with solutions that afflict the sovereignty of nation states and violate the right to life, right to freedom, and property of persons. It's an agenda that purports to resolve poverty, inequality, discrimination with legislation that simply furthers these issues, because the history of the world has shown that the only way of guaranteeing prosperity is by limiting the power of the monarch, by guaranteeing equality before the law, defending the right to life, to freedom, and to the ownership and property of individuals. The adoption of this agenda is fully in line with these privileged interests and looks beyond the principles that were set out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It has therefore twisted the role of this organisation and set it on the wrong course. We've seen how an organisation that was born to defend the rights of man has become one of the main proponents of systematic violations of freedom, such as, for instance, the lockdowns imposed in 2020, which should be seen as a crime against humanity. In this same house, that purports to defend human rights, we have also included bloody dictatorships in the Human Rights Council, including Cuba and Venezuela, without reproach. In this same house, which purports to defend the rights of women, we've allowed on CEDAW, the CEDAW committee, countries that punish their women just for showing their skin. In this same house that have voted against the state of Israel, which is the only country in the Middle East to defend a liberal democracy, we have simultaneously shown a total inability to respond to the scourge of terrorism. On the economic level, we have promoted collectivist policies that undermine economic growth, violate property rights, and disrupt a natural economic process, preventing the most left behind countries to freely enjoy their own resources. They have imposed regulations and prohibitions specifically because of countries that wish to develop themselves. We have further established a toxic relationship between global governance and international credit bodies, demanding that those countries that are most left behind commit resources that they don't have to programs that they don't need, making them perpetual debtors.
Okay, that's Javier Milei and his address, and hopefully that will have got you a little bit anxious based on what he was saying there regarding what's going on here. He's calling it out. He's calling out the collectivists who are looking to put this together and driving an agenda here. He's expressing concerns, major concerns in terms of impacts on sovereignty. And of course, if you dare say anything like that, you will have all of the fact checkers coming down on top of you. So if you see anybody talking about impacts to sovereignty, you will very soon see some group that is funded by a national government or probably by the UN to actually do a fact check on them. But I think we're all smart enough. We're all adults. I think we all have minds of our own to make up our own minds. We don't need people to tell us. So here it is. If you listen to his address, I think it's concerning. Now we have a second video, which actually came out. This video came out a few days before the event, before the gathering of the United Nations to ratify that kind of pact for the future. And again, take a listen to the what these guys have to say. These are some senators in the US who are very, very concerned about this event. They're very concerned about what was happening here. And I think, again, well worth a listen. Now, you know, again, at a time when nobody was talking about this, I wasn't aware of it. I'll have to be honest. The first time I became aware of this particular pact was when I saw this YouTube video popped up in my feed. And I say an awful lot of people have no awareness because it wasn't in the mainstream news. I know RTE have a couple of items if you do a search, but I certainly didn't see any headlines talking about it. And I don't think you did, Jana. I think most people didn't see it.
No, I caught it from Micheál Martin's tweet and I thought, what did he sign us up to? What's this all about? And it's worth noting, I found an article in the news that it states that 7 countries requested amendments to this. And the reason why is they were concerned about, and I have the article here, they were concerned about external bodies, external entities, basically meddling in their domestic affairs and the effect on the sovereignty of their nation. So that was mentioned, that this pact will affect the nation's sovereignty and the freedoms and democracy of their people.
Agreed, yeah. I think that's a very valid concern, and I think we should probably have expressed that concern, but we didn't. We just bought into it. So, as I said, we have the links in the description. You can start checking it out for yourself. You'll see very little coverage, as I say, on mainstream media, so very little going to give you guidance on this. So I think you need to start informing yourself. Certainly watch these 2 videos, and you might want to do some searches around and, as I say, read the various articles and form your own opinion. So we'll have more on this, Jana. I think we will talk about the SDGs, the 17 SDGs again. I think we do need to go through them. But this is coming and it's been ratified. So it's happening.
And I think, Eugene, the question is always, we hear all this, horrific stuff happening all around us and, being very, action oriented and solution focused. We always ask, well, what can we do? What can we change? And with this particular Pact for the Future, it's UN driven. Micheál Martin has agreed Ireland to this. What can we do? And I think thinking about it, it's going to take somebody to take a constitutional challenge to it, the likes of someone who, in the Senate, who very much is, up to date with the constitutional law, like a Senator Michael McDowell. It's going to take someone to look at this and scrutinize it and say, this can't be constitutional, and challenge it from a constitutional perspective, because we fought against the WHO treaty, and that sort of, lost its traction, ran out of oxygen, because so many countries realized that that was not a good thing for countries, their sovereignty and their freedoms. But this has been slipped in the back door, and it's even worse. So someone in the Senate and someone in the Dáil needs to take a constitutional challenge to this UN pact for the future.
Yeah. And I think the TDs will be calling to your door. So they're already going around, because we suspect the election will be called shortly. So you need to tell them that you're not happy that the government went with a unilateral decision to go with it without asking the Irish people. So for now, let's go with that. And there is an election coming. So if you see politicians who aren't supporting the people of Ireland and are all just bought into this, like, we talk about globalism. This is globalism, on steroids, basically. Then you need to make that known, and you need to vote for people who you believe will represent Ireland properly in that general election when it does come. So that's it, Jana. That's this particular one. It's a quick session to give people an update on this. I think I suspect most people aren't aware of it. So now you're aware.
I haven't heard this. I haven't even seen really tweets about it. It has been something that's been very much very quiet, particularly with elections coming up next month. And, it's really important that we continue to, I know people are tired. There's so much happening that's wrong. There's so much to push back on. But we've seen regarding, particularly with the SPHE, that if you push hard enough and you keep pushing, things will eventually be exposed and they will collapse. Look at the hate speech bill that kept getting, McEntee's pet hate speech bill kept getting kicked down the road. They couldn't even define hate. I'm sure after the election, they'll try to sneak it back in, but it lost the air in the tires because enough people pushed back, and the Senate, it didn't make it through the Senate, and people challenged it. So the same thing needs to happen with all of these issues that are so wrong. And hopefully, the biggest solution will be to vote all of these politicians out who are putting our sovereignty and our freedoms and our democracy in grave danger.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's it for tonight, everyone. So thanks for watching and tuning in, and tune in next week. Next week we're in our next podcast, probably less than a week. The way information's happening so quickly, so tune in for that one next time.